My name's Luke Williams. I'm the Executive Director for the Berkley Entrepreneurship Center for Innovation that puts on the competition. And we've got a whole day of activities planned. So I hope you join us for the whole days. We'll be announcing the winners at the end at 5 o'clock. Now, what we're here to do this morning is introduce one of the competitions from the challenge. And I should say the challenge, we had a remarkable turnout this year. We had, it was almost 400 teams from about 14, or 180 teams from 14 schools across the university. So it was an amazing mix. Now the technology competition, this is the third annual technology venture competition, and it really serves as a catalyst for the formation of new businesses or the acceleration of existing ones using exciting new technologies. Now the finalists are competing for $75,000 award donated by the NYU Innovation Venture Fund, Eisner Amper, Lowenstein Sandler, and Metadata Solutions. Now, right after the pitches, so after we get through each of the pitches, you guys will have a chance to vote on your favourite as well. So we'll come in and explain the audience voting process. Now, in terms of this competition, we had 31 teams enter from 4 different schools in the New York University network, including the NYU Medical Center. And obviously we have 4 teams remaining that are pitching today. Now for the rest of the day, if you can, at noon, we're going to be starting off the 11th annual social venture competition. At 2:15 roundabouts, we've got the 14th annual Stern New Venture competition. So that's for pretty much covers every new business, a lot of consumer stuff, doesn't necessarily have to have technology in it. And then at about 5:15 is when we're having the award announcements and then the celebrations later, which will go through till about 8 or 9 o'clock. Actually, that was perfect timing. That sneeze was from Frank Rimolowski. And Frank is the Executive Director of the newly formed NYU Entrepreneurial Institute and the Executive Director of the NYU Innovation Venture. So wonderful to have Frank here. He is the brainchild behind this competition, has been responsible for a lot of its success over the last 3 years. And now I'd like to introduce our panel of judges, all sitting here nice and cozy, guys. Fantastic. You're all good friends. That's good to see. We have David Arnoff. David is General Partner of Flybridge Capital Partners, whose investment interests and experience include SAS Cloud, is it? Is that how you pronounce it, David? Yeah. Mobile data analytics, video and information security sectors. We've got Micah Rosenblum, spent his career starting and funding tech enterprises. He's currently a venture partner with Founder Collective, leading seed investments out of New York City. Most recently founded Sample 6 Technologies, a Boston-based company for building a diagnostic and monitoring platform for harmful bacteria in food and healthcare settings. We have Jeffrey Smith. Jeffrey is the founding director of the Center for Technology, Innovation and Entrepreneurship at Mount Sinai School of Medicine. He's also a professor in the Department of Health Evidence and Policy at MSSM. And David Tisch, we have with us, is the managing partner of Box Group, a New York City-based seed stage capital firm, which has made over 60 investments in New York City-based technology companies. Many of you also know David as the co-founder of Techstars New York City, where he previously served as managing director. And David was named by Mayor Michael Bloomberg's Advisory Council on Technology and serves on the investor board of Venture for America. And finally, we have Fred Wilson. I love Fred's bio because it's so short. Like his Twitter handle, I am a VC. So Fred has been a venture capitalist since 1987, and he currently is a managing partner in Union Square Ventures and also founded Flatiron Partners. So please, a round of applause for our judges with us today. Thank you for joining us. Okay. So the format for the pitches, essentially the teams are going to be pitching for 10 minutes. So that is their chance to tell the story of what their new venture is about in 10 minutes. And then we've got 20 minutes to get into Q&A. So this is when the judges will be interacting on a lot of the details that they either saw in the presentation or that were saved till later for discussion. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Bio-Inspired Devices.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Manushka, and I am a PhD candidate at NYU. These are my teammates Abhishek and Arun, who are senior medical students, and we're co-founders of Bio-Inspired Devices. We engineer solutions inspired by nature to solve problems in medicine. Lucky for us, nature has 3.8 billion years of product development and re-engineering. And we look at nature to solve one of the biggest problems in hospitals today, hospital-acquired infections. So we all fall sick sometimes, and sometimes we have to go to the hospital. And we think of a hospital as a clean, sterile environment where a patient will get better. But the reality is that the devices used to treat patients sometimes introduce bacteria. And these bacteria accumulate, causing infections called hospital-acquired infections. So how are these problems treated today? Well, we throw antibiotics at the infection, and we hope that it goes away. And if it doesn't, more antibiotics are prescribed. Unfortunately, this just does not work. Medicine today is reactive. The problem is treated after it occurs. We want to prevent the problem from even happening in the first place. Today, each year in the US, 1.7 million people get infections, and 100,000 people die from these infections. And this number is larger than the deaths combined from breast cancer, AIDS, and even car accidents. Just think about that. In addition, there's an added frustration because hospitals are no longer covered by insurance companies. So they have to pay all costs according to whatever they have to pay for infections. In addition, if you have an infection, it affects you too. So that means staying longer in the hospital, losing out workdays, and dealing with an additional disease. And this whole problem cost the healthcare system $4.5 billion. Now, these numbers are staggering, but they became real personal to me 6 years ago when my grandmother was admitted to a hospital due to a stroke. She was required to use a urinary catheter to help her bladder drain, and almost immediately she caught a catheter-associated UTI, which is actually quite common. Ultimately, it was this infection that claimed her life. And I remember being extremely frustrated at that moment and for many years later because it was a hospital device and a subsequent infection that took her away from us. Many years later, when I was telling about this incident to a neurosurgeon, she said to me that, this is a huge problem, and catheter-associated urinary tract infections are the leading hospital-acquired infection. There's simply no good solution out there, and that's why a hospital is no place for sick people. So let me take your attention to this plastic catheter that we have here. What is it about this plastic tube that causes thousands of Americans each year to get infections? I mean, we have tubes in our body too, right? We have 25,000 miles of tubes, veins, and arteries that do the same thing. They're taking fluid from one place to another. But the plastic tube just simply does not have the healthy protective mechanisms of our body. And that's why leading officials say today, if you don't want an infection, just don't use the device. So we looked at nature, and if you look at an onion, and if you try to peel the outer layers away, you can see that the outer layers protect the inside. And that's exactly what our skin is doing as well, right? The outer layers protect what's inside. And as the skin sheds, all the accumulated bacteria are shed away. And this prevents bacterial accumulation and subsequent infection. And we wanted to incorporate this idea of shedding into catheters to prevent infections in the first place. And I'm going to let Arun tell you exactly how we did that.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to show you that we have our first prototype finally built. As soon as we got this, Abhishek volunteered to do a live demonstration here for us. But then he slowly realized what he signed up for, and we had to decide on just showing you guys about the catheter. So externally, it looks identical to current catheters. But when we take a cross-section, you see our shedding technology depicted in black on the screen. When urine flows, bacteria begins to accumulate. However, in our catheter, it's unable to adhere. It's simply washed away. This is precisely where our catheter differs from current catheters. Current catheters throw antibiotics at the bacteria, hoping to kill the bacteria. This simply doesn't work. Our catheter does work. You never get infected in the first place. So I want to tell you about where we are in our product development today. We've identified a material. We have conducted successful degradation tests, and we have finalized a protocol with a third-party microbiology company. I want to tell you or remind you of what Manushka mentioned, that leading officials recommend not using traditional Foley catheters if you want to prevent bad outcomes. When we took our device to expert urologists, this is what they had to say. They immediately knew we were onto something. We went one step further and talked to a physician who specialized in the prevention of catheter-associated urinary tract infections. He knew that we had substantial potential in the chronically catheterized patient. So the market potential for our product is huge. 100 million catheters are sold each year across the globe. 25 million of those are right here in the United States. And with the baby boomers aging, we know that number's growing. In fact, Bard, the leading manufacturer of current Foley catheters, reports a 5% compounded annual growth rate for the past 5 years in their urinary product line. Next, what are our overarching advantages? Prevention. And because of that, everyone benefits. First are consumers, hospitals. They benefit because they're no longer penalized by Medicare's no-pay rule. Next, we have the end user, the patients, who benefit most. They're no longer suffering from pain and infection. And lastly, the physicians who advocate for their patients. They're happy, they have happy, infection-free patients. So we know we have a great product, but is it feasible?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the numbers. Right now, the current catheter, if we were to purchase it, costs around $15. But when we went to our manufacturer to see how much we could produce ours for, we got it down to $1.60, and we set our price point at $22.50. And with that in mind, if we can even get a 1% global market rate, we'll be able to get a $10 million profit at our 3-year mark. So why would they want to use our catheter? Right now, if the current catheter gets infected, it costs the hospital almost $1,000 to treat. And if it complicates, boom, triples. This causes this system almost $1 billion. But we'll be able to save them that money. And right now, if we can achieve even a 23% reduction in the catheter-associated UTI rate, we will start giving hospitals, saving them the money that they need very much so. But we're not going to stop there. We are going to be the standard of care for catheters. And we are going to start pushing to get that 100% mark. And when we do, we'll be able to save over $700 million for the healthcare system. So we knew that we are science engineers. We would have to put our lab coats away for a little bit, and we got our business suits on. And we started thinking, we got our patent pending catheter in place. And with our advisors that have come to support us, we have physicians, general counsel, and also Stern mentors and advisors helping us through this. We are set that at the end of May, to submit our first submission for FDA approval. But that's not all. We want to be able to get, by the end of May, by a third-party independent contractor, our microbiology studies, and then also submit for our full patent by November. And for this, we need your help. We anticipate the whole cost of this to be around over $200,000 right now, and we want to be able to produce our standard of care catheter in the market. So, but that's not all. We have more.
So we talked about this great concept of shedding, which can be incorporated into urinary catheters that prevents infections, saves millions of dollars in healthcare, and more importantly, saves lives. But we're not about one product. And this idea of shedding can be applied to many other medical devices, such as shunts and even stents. But again, bio-inspired devices isn't about just one idea either. We anticipate coming up with many other concepts and many other ideas which will bloom into future products. Thank you so much for your attention today.
Okay, questions from the judges? Who wants to kick it off?
I'll start. So, great presentation, guys. I guess my question is, there are a lot of ways to deal with harmful, bacteria and microbes, antimicrobial coatings, lots more consumables. You're seeing that in devices. What efficacy data do you have that this technique outperforms the conventional catheters? I didn't see much around clinical evidence or clinical data. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So we were on track to get that right now with the microbiologist, and we have a protocol in place that we were going to be implementing. We just developed our first working prototype, which was a huge advantage for us. We didn't have that up till now, and now that we have that in our hand, over the next week or two, we're going to be contracting with them to be able to get the flow rates and be able to see visually, how much bacteria is sticking on our catheter compared to the standard catheter right now. And
we'll give you a call as soon as we get the results.
It's tricky, but we're getting there, and we have a plan right now within the next week or two to get that done.
Can you take us through your go-to-market strategy? You didn't have a chance to really cover it in this pitch, but we saw it in your business plan.
All right, so this is how we intend to distribute. Ideally, we would like to sell directly to group purchasing organizations. The Healthcare Supply Chain Association is a network of group purchasing organizations that specifically attract GPOs that focus on products that prevent infections. So ideally, we would like to distribute to them. But we know that infiltrating into these networks is very difficult, and we are not opposed to licensing it to other Foley catheter companies and having them just use their distribution network.
And do you have a sense from this kind of food chain what you need to have proven before these distributors or the channels will actually take your product? How far along do you have to be before that can happen?
So first we have to have FDA approval. And once we get FDA approval, we'll have clinical studies, which will take place. And right now, we have advisors who are in family medicine and urologists who are ready to jump and do these pilot clinical studies in their hospitals. So once we have that, that's when we can go and approach these group purchasing organizations.
So can you describe in a little bit more detail what regulatory path you have to fall under, and have you done any work to understand the scale of the clinical validation? So how many patients, what kind of follow-up, what your endpoints are?
Yeah, so addressing the first thing about getting onto the market potentially. So we knew this would be a big problem when we start thinking about the FDA. Everyone gets scared about it. They're like, it's not going to happen, it takes forever. But after we had a consultant talk to us from the FDA who worked in the device approval process, and they even advised us and guided us, and we realized that our catheter is actually luckily qualifies for the 510K process, which is an exemption, and it allows our catheter to get onto market a lot sooner with not a full-blown clinical trial, which costs millions of dollars.
So what's your predicate device?
Our predicate device, could you clarify that a little bit?
So for a 510K approval, you have to have a predicate device that you refer back to.
So the substantially equivalent Foley catheter will probably, it's currently the standard is antibiotic-eluting catheters. So we'll compare to those, but basic studies are conducted with catheters that don't have antibiotics embedded in them to show.
So will your plan be to do a clinical trial then that compares against standard of care? And are you going to do a randomized, blinded, controlled study, or are you going to?
Yes, and that's the beauty of our catheter. It looks identical externally to current catheters, so we will have the opportunity to make it a very powerful study, where oftentimes to reach that golden standard, it's very difficult in the medical device industry.
Yeah.
But
So how many patients and how long do you have to follow them?
So we were also thinking about this, and we didn't know, as medical students, we were thinking about how many patients would we need. So we went just recently and spoke to Dr. Sanjay Singh. He's one of the leading catheter-associated UTI experts, and he works at University of Michigan. He said that even setting up a 50 to 100 patient small pilot study would be sufficient for now to prove head-to-head studies, and that would be what even previous catheters, like you were talking about, antibiotic-eluting, silver-coated, that they do as well from the company standpoint of view to prove efficacy.
And what's the cost of that trial?
And again, he said that just to do the trial so that someone can conduct it, because we're not physicians yet, and we will be, but it would cost between $150,000 to $250,000 for the trial, depending upon where you do it and the scale, obviously. Yeah.
Great job, guys. Who's the leading catheter, I guess, who owns the market today, and what's their percentage of the market, and are they part of a, will you just walk me through sort of the existing catheter market?
This is kind of what Arun was referring to. Bard right now owns and distributes almost 80% of the Foley catheter market right now.
What company?
Bard, CR Bard. And with them, with their network and distribution that they have in place, that's what we wanted to maybe potentially take advantage of in the future with their catheters. Right now, when you see a catheter, you see Bard as the catheter.
And so does Bard sell a lot of other equipment to hospitals, and is that their way into the catheter business? And so
Correct.
Are you guys going to have to compromise their business on the catheter? Like, will you walk me through that? Because they're sort of
Definitely.
they have a deep in with all the hospitals. et cetera.
Definitely. So as you were saying, hospitals have contracts with Bard because Bard sells a lot of other medical devices, so they're able to subsidize certain products. And then, so we're competing against that subsidized cost actually. But the beauty of it is that hospitals right now are not getting paid for hospital-acquired infections that they're getting from these catheters. So when it always ends at the buck, and when the pressure gets put on by these hospitals to Bard that, hey, we're buying your $5 or $10 catheter for a discount, but we're ending up shelling out $700 million. It just doesn't make sense. And so that's why we will become really appealing. And if we can get the standard of care and we can prove our efficacy is better through trials that we do later on, they will have to accept us and they will be competing against us.
So how many different types of infections are there?
Right now, since with the catheter, there's the one major problem, the catheter-associated UTIs. There are a slew of other hospital-acquired infections.
Within that category, how many bugs are causing the problem?
The main bug is E. coli, and that's the bug to kill. And because
do you have any evidence that your catheter can cover both E. coli as well as, C. diff, versus other?
So the beauty of our catheter is that it's not about killing the bacteria like all the other catheters are. And the thing that, it's interesting that you mentioned this, there were clinical trials out there, and the protocol has been that the guidelines say that using antimicrobials for regular use in catheters does not work. It's not recommended to be using. You shouldn't be using it because we have to be preventing these. So it's not about killing the bacteria. We don't kill bacteria that are on our hand. What do? We shed it. We don't have to keep throwing antibiotics. Are you taking antibiotics every day? I don't think so. And that's what we're doing. Our catheter is able to shed. And so it doesn't matter what kind of bacteria, what the resistance is. We are able to get rid of the bacteria out with the flow, and we also don't lead to the problem, which is eventually coming up, of antimicrobial resistance.
Is there any risk of your technology actually enhancing some other bugs? And so you guys are creating a shedding, living thing that maybe other bacteria will attach to and cause unforeseen problems? Is that a concern?
So our shedding material is a polymer, and there's actually, these polymers are a big family which are already out there. They've been used in absorbable sutures, anti-wrinkle therapies, and drug delivery. So they're already out there being used in medicine, but they aren't used for our application. So
in terms of your patents then,
yeah.
do you have an issue because you have is it a use patent, a method patent, or do you actually have some protection around the polymer formulation
we
itself?
do. We've talked about polymer formulations. We've talked about the kind of functionality of the polymers. So all of that has been covered.
Mm-hmm. And so how broad is the patent? Does it give you just freedom to operate, or is it really carving out a protected space for you?
No, it's really, really broad right now. There are some aspects that we thought about later, which are in the provisional patent, which we might incorporate later into our prototype.
Yeah. We were advised that we need to initially at least be as broad as possible. And our goal is to eventually get a patent attorney that's able to help us get the full patent established. And at that point, from broad to specific, we'll be able to cover our bases.
But the broadness is based off the specific polymer that you use?
No.
No.
The beauty of our polymer is that if you think of, we all know, have you all seen and heard about those sutures that they put in the body that dissolve? That's where we started off from. And that's the material that we use to expand on our device. The proprietary aspect of this is not just that we're using that family of material. We need the correct molecular weight. We need to be able to have the correct rate of degradation. So there's a lot more components to this, and we've covered these things in our patent about which materials we're considering to be used, where we want the material to be placed in and around the catheter. And so we've kind of really gone really broad off the bat, and we're hoping that as we were progressing, we would funnel it into our final device that we make.
And just to add to that, the reason we kept it more broad is because it can be used for all these devices. So, but the material properties in each of these devices might differ, but the broad general.
So it's material in any tube.
Yes, exactly. So all of these medical devices have one thing in common. They're a tube.
And so from the manufacturing perspective, are you coating your polymer onto the inside of the tube?
So we're currently considering multi-extrusion processes.
Yeah, and just to explain multi-extrusion, it's when you are dealing with different polymers that you want to be able to line them up correctly because they don't necessarily always stick to each other the way you want it to. But the beauty of our thing is that since we're going to be involving latex and silicone, these things can be stretched around our material so that even if they don't necessarily want to stick to each other, we can have them holding each other and in place. So we have ways out if one way doesn't work out in the way we're theorizing it. But again, this is all based off of talks with manufacturers that we're like, okay, this process is most likely going to work, but we always, as engineers, we have to have a fail-safe.
So, but the $1.60 cost that you quoted there, or the $1.60, is that it?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that includes this process.
It includes the multi-extrusion process,
Yes.
not our fail-safe.
Right.
The fail-safe will be even cheaper. We're talking about as complex as we can get it, the way we want it. We're always talking about idealists. Like, we want to be ideal right now. We want to solve this problem.
Right. So from, help us with your startup costs, because I'm a little confused about what the 237 gets you to.
Okay. Sure. So Arun will handle these questions.
So this 237 is going to cover these 4 items right here.
Can you go back this one? Yeah.
You want me to cover these?
Yes, please.
All right, so the bench testing we are estimating to be $45,000. This is because it'll take iterations of our material to see.
Yeah, Rick, I guess I'm more interested more at a high level. So it's $237,000 to get you
to December to have our 510K sent in and our patent filed.
Yeah, and again, to expand on his, like we were talking with Micromix, a simple trial of doing a head-to-head comparison to get a picture of whether our bacteria are able to stick or not, that's simple, just simply doing that is $3,000. And we know we're going to have to do multiple iterations, and that's what we thought about there. And once we go here, the FDA process in itself is $2,500 just to submit the application.
So is it a class 1 device?
It's
Yes.
going to be a, no,
No.
it's going to be a class 2 device.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the main cost here is going to be the patent, because we want to be, as identified earlier, protecting our technology. And that's why we're going to have a bulk of our costs to be the patent, and then the cost of running an animal trial or potentially a human pilot trial, depending upon the timing, whether we have FDA approval or not, that's going to range between $150 to $250. So we took the bottom ranges of $150, added on our numbers of $40, and then also the bench testing.
So where are the,
wise.
I'm trying to grok, where are the additional costs, like the people you have to hire, the product development, everything else? I mean, this just seems super light.
Yes. Again, we're focusing right at the start of what we need to get done right now that we can handle.
But you have in there key hires in management, marketing, and sales in August
Correct.
for free.
No.
Do you have those people?
We are always about giving credit where credit's due. And we were actually, while we were talking to our advisors and mentors, that we got info from a venture capitalist and a consulting company that told us that for equity, that they would be able to provide management companies for us. So it won't necessarily be a direct
You should never
cost.
listen to venture capitalists.
We love them. We have to have them. So yes,
Can you
and
tell
so,
me
and that's what we would have to trade off. So we don't want to necessarily ask for too much money up front, being that we have the entire equity at our level right now.
Well, so just to push back on that, why do you need venture capital? Why don't you go get an SBIR to fund, this amount of money so that you can finish out, some of these technical details before moving forward?
So again, that's why I didn't put most of the cost over here. We are applying right now for awards first. We're not necessarily wanting to go to venture capitalists immediately. And we know we become more valuable once we get FDA approval. Once we start getting one of the leading authorities on our team, and he says, I'm going to lead you guys, we become more valuable, and we are going to get there eventually. We don't need the venture capitalist funds immediately.
Okay, so assuming everything goes great
Yep.
and you start the 510K in December, which is, at least in our experience, is super aggressive, to go 7 months to begin the pilot studies. But let's just suspend disbelief for a second.
Yeah.
How long are you planning for it to take to get approval? And how much would that cost you? Rough numbers.
Right. So FDA, we
Yeah.
know that they have a 120-day, after you submit, they should be technically giving you the answer. And I know that seems aggressive because what happens is that when they ask for more information, that clock stops. So even though we're being aggressive with the 4 months, we've given ourselves all the way till November and December to give ourselves more time. Right now it's April, and we give ourselves we almost doubled the amount of time to get the FDA approval process for all the pauses and all the things like that. And we will have to be hiring consultants to do this for us, the FDA approval process.
Well, that's the 510K approval, the pilot
Correct.
studies, but I'm asking kind of the next phase, which is, again, suspending disbelief. Our experience has been very, very different than
Right.
that. But what's the time frame to actually get full approval to actually, release to the market in your mind? So it'd be beyond this pilot, which costs you roughly $250,000. Then what do you need to actually take it to market? How long will it take you?
So the production could happen almost instantaneously once we get the prototype approved. And it's just a matter of telling them and paying them to get the initial order in. And I think once we get...
So you think you're going to be in the market in 2014?
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is that we might, as an alternative, because we realize going through and creating our own marketing channels might be very difficult, we have this second option of going to the leading catheter producer right now and telling them about our idea and all the progress we made, and with the backing of our pilot study results and hospitals saying that they want this device and they will want us. They will want us to be incorporated into their array of devices to be distributed. And that's what allows us to be so aggressive. And when you think about it, we came up with this idea in October. Since then, it's only been 7 months.
What do you think, Abhishek, what do you
Yes.
think the average time for a medical device company to get into market is, even, just in general?
So for a new device, it's definitely longer, but the advantage that we have is that it's substantially equivalent to the current catheters that are
Okay,
used
so
today.
in terms of benchmarks, just for other things, what's your time frame? I'll tell you what ours is, but I want to hear what yours is first, just an expectation.
To get it on the market.
Yeah.
I expect end of 2014.
No, I'm talking about if you look at benchmarks for other companies. So if you look at comparables for things that have been done, have you guys looked at other, 510K pathway devices and using substantially equivalent?
We've told it takes longer than 120 days for sure. So that's
But
one thing
We've
we
seen
know.
that.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you think?
Alternative.
Well, so I think the answer you want to get here and the advice you're being given is you need to look at other Class 2 devices, how long it typically takes a Class 2 device to get through the process. But it's certainly not the relevant question, because even with the clearance, the real question is how much time and cost is going to take you to get enough clinical data that anybody's going to care.
Right, and the regulatory pathway is definitely something that we're going to have to get advice on and consult on. But after we talked to Dr. Saint about getting a 50 to 100 patients catheter trial, and judging by a lot of our family members are in the medical field, they said and they advised us that to get 50 to 100 patients, that would take us around 1 to 3 months to do a head-to-head trial if they wanted to do it for us. And that was the time frame that we got.
So no animal tests, so you're not, where are the animal tests coming in, or are you not planning them?
We want to, and it all depends on the FDA approval site. We want to get to animal testings first, and doing it in maybe India as well will make the process quicker. And that's, again, another place where we will need funding for.
And is there a validated animal model for catheter-acquired UTIs?
Pigs are always used for all these devices, and that's what we were planning on using as well for this. We use pig devices for our hearts as well, so they've been tested in the medical device industry.
There are good reasons why the pig heart is the good model for humans. Are pigs a good model for catheter-acquired UTIs?
We believe so, and we're going to try to see if it works out. We're going to see, and yep. That's the whole point. And the beauty of animal trials are that they're a lot cheaper than human trials. And so we might be able to go to a goat, we might be able to do sheep, and we might be able to do pigs. Our first eye is on pigs.
So guys, we're pretty much out of time in the Q&A. Is there one final question from any of you? No? How are you guys feeling? Good?
Good.
Grueling, huh?
Yeah.
Very grueling in front of these guys. You did very well. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to have a short transition and be back with Diabetes in just a moment. Thanks, guys. Wendy?
To the stars. She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. 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 The present has no ribbon. Your gift keeps on giving. What is this I'm feeling? If you wanna leave, I'm with it. We've come too far to give up who we are. So let's raise the bar and our cups to the stars. She's up all night to the sun. I'm up all night to get some. She's up all night for good fun. I'm up all night to get lucky. We're up all night to the sun. We're up all night to get some. We're up all night for good fun. We're up all night to get lucky. 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 We're up all night to get. 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 We're up all night to get lucky. 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 We're up all night to get
start
In the
dancing. in a minute. Yeah, we'll have the-
summertime, you are all
Kill the music,
mine.
please. Thank you. I should mention we've got Dean Myers here doing a great job. He's graphically recording each pitch, and we'll have these in the lobby later. So it'll give when you're going through, we'll give you reminders of key concepts behind each business venture as we're going through. So thanks for being here today, Dean. All right. Next up is Databetes. We've got Doug, Darcy, and Ryan. Databetes explores new ways of using data to improve health outcomes for people with diabetes. Databetes is uniquely positioned to provide web and mobile-based software, delivering data-driven clinical and educational services. Please welcome Databetes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Doug Cantor. I'm here with Darcy Somm and Ryan Viglizio, and we're the team from Databetes. We're developing cloud-based software to help diabetes patients better manage their condition. We're in the middle of a diabetes epidemic. Currently, 1 in 10 American adults is diabetic. According to CDC projections, those numbers will reach 1 in 3 by the year 2050. I know and care about the diabetes space because I'm a patient myself. I've been living with type 1 diabetes for 26 years. These are the 3 devices I use every day to manage my condition. 3 to 4 times a day, I take readings from the device on the left, a blood glucose monitor, and enter them into the device on the right, a continuous glucose monitor. I then take those readings and manually decide how much insulin to give myself with the device in the middle, an insulin pump. All day long, I'm running these numbers. Even when I'm eating, I'm running these numbers. You may look at a picture of food and think about whether you're hungry or not. For me, I'm thinking about the carbohydrate counts. Those counts help me determine how much insulin I should take and how I can best keep my blood sugars under control. Even when I'm exercising, I'm thinking about these numbers. This is my standard 5-mile run in Brooklyn, and I'm planning ahead so that I don't have a low blood sugar reaction in the middle of it. So the question becomes, who's there to help me? You would think it would be my doctor, but in fact, the average patient only sees their doctor 2 hours a year, leaving themselves on their own 99% of the time. These medical devices are great pieces of hardware, but the data they generate are siloed within proprietary software systems. We have a lot of great new devices and services coming online, but none of them are integrated into diabetes software solutions. Diabetes remains a lifestyle condition without lifestyle support. I founded Databetes with the belief that if I could get all of my readings into one place, that I could live healthier. And so in 2012, I decided to test that. Throughout every single day of the year, I kept track of every single data point that influenced my diabetes control, starting with my medical devices, but also using all these other devices and services out there. I had over 100,000 blood sugar readings alone. I kept track of every single meal I ate in a Google Doc, and I also took thousands of pictures of my food. The result? 2012 was the healthiest year of my life. These are my A1C blood test readings from the last 10 years. A1C is the standard metric for measuring diabetes control, with 7.0 being the recommended level of control. The goal is to get the lower the better. I've never had readings like this in my life, and I was able to maintain those numbers throughout the year. At Databetes, for me, aggregating all this data was a tedious task. But with Databetes, we're developing tools that will make that easier. We want to make it so that other patients out there, the millions of other patients out there, can achieve similar levels of control. Our goal is we are aggregating this information and providing predictive analytics that provide actionable information that help diabetes patients make those daily decisions and improve their control and lower the associated treatment costs. Our first product is a mobile app called Meal Memory. We're currently beta testing it among 10 users here in New York. Meal Memory provides nutritional support. If you're like me, you have the meals that you eat most often, and you also have your favorite restaurants. You have millions of patients out there every day generating this little bit of knowledge in these carbohydrate counts, but there's no system out there to aggregate it all. With Meal Memory, we're changing that. With just a picture, you start logging a meal, and it saves that carbohydrate count along with a pre-meal blood sugar. 3 hours later, we send your phone an alert to get a post-meal blood sugar. With these 2 data points, you have now a way of gauging whether you're counting carbs correctly, and if you're not, we can help you get better at it. And then next time you eat this meal, now you have actionable information to base your medication dosage on next time. Retrieving the information is easy. You just simply hit places, and it lists all the restaurants in the area, as well as your complete meal archive. We've also included a nutritional database of 60,000 menu items from 500 chain restaurants. So if you eat at someplace like Starbucks, with our app, you just simply click on the menu item and it will give you the official nutrient breakdown. Looking forward, we believe the system can work beyond just chain restaurants, but mom and pop restaurants, home cooking, and recipes. We want to be able to offer carbohydrate count estimates of meals you've never even eaten yet, and also predictive analytics about what that meal will do to your blood sugar. All this data will flow into our self-management support system. This is some screenshots of it under development. The power is really in the being able to contextualize all these different types of readings, allowing patients to educate themselves and make better decisions. We solicited feedback on the system from others here in New York, beginning with Dr. Bergman, an endocrinologist at NYU Langone. He believes that there's great potential in using meal memory beyond just the 26 million diabetes patients, but also the 79 million pre-diabetics in the US. My doctors at Columbia Presbyterian's NYU Diabetes Center believe that it can also be an effective treatment for gestational diabetes, which affects 18% of all pregnancies. But the self-management support system is just one of 2 products that we're developing. The other is a complete disease management solution that we're marketing to insurance companies and providers. We know that not every patient out there is as actively managing their condition as I am. And so, along with a clinical partner, we can leverage our existing technologies from our self-management support system and the data we're aggregating to provide patient coaching and clinical decision support. Our goal is to help drastically reduce the $80 billion spent on hospitalization costs every year in the US, the biggest part of the $250 billion spent annually on diabetes in America. As far as a business model, we're marketing a self-management support system on a freemium model with an $8 premium version marketed mainly to parents so they can better track their children. Our early adopters will be type 1 patients who generate the most amount of data and who can also most benefit from a system like this. Our disease management solution will be marketed on a subscription model at $100 per patient per month. Our goal is to help reduce the hospital emergency room submissions, which cost on average $5,000 per visit. As long as we can reduce 1 hospitalization every 4 years, the system pays for itself. According to industry research, a 2% drop in A1Cs with a system like this can translate to $2,000 per year in cost savings. Database makes better use of the data being generated by these devices and gives clinics a more efficient and effective way to use this data. But we also heavily focus on returning this data to patients and giving them the tools to make better informed decisions. Our focus on this part of the equation is what differentiates us from our competitors. We believe that in order to effectively tackle the diabetes crisis, you need to provide a more patient-centric approach. We're looking to raise $500,000 for the first year of development and looking for your support to help us complete mobile development of meal memory for both Android and iOS, as well as complete and release our self-management support system. With that money, we can also sign a clinical partner and be on the path to developing our disease management solution. Our projections that by the middle of year 3 that we can break even with 5,000 disease management patients and 3,200 premium subscribers. On our team, Ryan Viglizio is my classmate at ITP. He's focused on user experience. Before ITP, he was an interaction designer at Xerox PARC. Darcy Salm is Database CTO. He's been building systems like this for 12 years for major corporations. In addition to my role as CEO, I focus on data visualization, which has been the main focus of my studies at ITP. Helping us are 4 great advisors, including 2 ITP alumni, Tariq Karula and Yasser Ansari. Stephen Dean is a designer focused on the health and wellness sector here in New York. And Nate Heitzman is an assistant professor of biomedical informatics at UCSD. At Diabetes, we're focused on providing self-management support through predictive analytics and decision support and facilitating behavior change. Thank you very much.
Nice work, Doug. When do you think that we will have non-invasive, real-time blood chemistry patches in the market?
I've seen other patches that are targeted to hit the market very soon, but I haven't seen much news on the blood sugar aspect of that equation.
Do you think that will happen in the next 5 years?
I know that there's different accuracy rates depending on the way that you test blood sugar. For instance, my CGM tests an interstitial fluid, while regular blood glucose meter tests in blood plasma, and the plasma is considered more accurate. So it's difficult for me to say whether, even if a system does hit the market, whether it'll have the same sort of accuracy rates to make real-time decisions.
But do you think that something like that is going to be required to really cause this market to take off?
Well, the developer Dexcom of my continuous glucose monitor, they're already looking to do real-time transmission of it in their Generation 5. Their current version is Generation 4. So to me, that sounds like another way to get to the exact same sort of...
But you have to prick yourself every time, right?
No, that's this device. So I have a needle in my stomach, but it lasts a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. How do you get the needle in your stomach? You swallow it?
It's right here.
I see.
Yeah.
So Fred, I thought you were going a slightly different place. So is there an opportunity for a technology to come along that would obviate the need for all of this because the technology is going to be self-managing the titration of the insulin delivery?
They're working on what they call a closed-loop system. It used to be called an artificial pancreas, but now they prefer that new term. It's under development, but they're still years away. As much as it's been shown as showing potential, they haven't even begun, the trials that are going to lead to, release. So people are estimating like 10 years.
Let's say 10 years away, not 5 years away.
I mean, some people are estimating that, yeah.
Okay.
No, I was just going to ask that. It sounds like you did a lot of work during that year when you were the healthiest year of your life. A lot of, keying in different values. My question is, how much can you automate all that stuff? I think it's sort of in line with, can you get, how much time right now does it take to upload all those pictures and put in all that data? And how automated do you think you can get it to reduce friction for the user?
Right. Obviously, the more automated the system, the better, and as much passive data aggregation you can get, the better as well. Obviously, some of the more consumer-facing products will have easier integration. Part of our goal is to get this demo to the point where we can engage the device manufacturers in more further conversations about integrating it directly. Right now, it really takes a manual upload, but then there's some synchronization that would be possible. For instance, with the CGM data, you wouldn't have to manually enter the blood glucose data because it would all sync, even if with a later synchronization.
Are there standards on those glucometers and stuff that you can Bluetooth or somehow get the data into software, or does that not exist today?
The technology is pretty, it's getting there. The newer blood glucose monitors are starting to have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth like you're talking about. A lot of the older meters aren't like that. Mm-hmm. There are no current standards within the diabetes industry, but there's a lot of patient advocacy groups that are working towards that. There's also a lot of people that are trying to be the next platform for these standardizations, be it Qualcomm, OpenM Health. A lot of people, this is an area that there's a lot of activity.
Great job, Doug. I guess
Can you hear me now?
Okay. My question is around why you built the product you built. I think your first minute, you articulate this ability to plug in all these things, these inputs, to say, okay, if we aggregate all this data, we can do some really interesting things. And then you turn to, we're going to build the single hardest, most crowded app in the App Store, which is basically the nutrition of mom and pop and sort of chain restaurants. That's a really hard problem that a lot of companies that have nothing to do with diabetes are going after. And it seems like you've entered into that market to compete with them, when in reality, my view would be you can take a step back and say all of them are going to go do their work. We're going to aggregate all the data that they figure out, and we're going to make a decision that we're not going to be the best people at deciding how many carbs are in Cozy's Diners, like matzo ball soup. Because that's not what you're solving. You're solving a diabetes problem. And it feels to me like you've built a food app when in reality you should have built a data aggregator. And I don't understand why the food app is the thing you're really pushing versus we're just going to create a platform where everybody can plug into us, and we're going to do some data analysis to say here are the changes you can make in your life to fix some things to get your results better. Can
Sure.
you just walk me through some of that?
No, absolutely. Well, first of all, we're an early stage company, and so meal memory is our first product. We plan on developing lots of products that will target multiple areas here. We started with nutrition in part because we're early, and we want to be able to go to the device manufacturers and show that we can produce things and that they have value and that they're different from other people on the market. I wouldn't have gotten the reaction that I did from those endocrinologists. I honestly believe that our system is different. They had never seen a system like this that really tries to use that archive data to help you support your current decisions. And it's just, like I said, we're really focused on these problems, that daily routine and solving some of these key pain
But
points.
let me push back a little. So you're an early stage company. Most companies end up only developing one product. And so the notion of we're going to do multiple products over the course of a life cycle, you're going to be judged on your first product, and that first product success is going to give you permission to do more. And I'm concerned that you just pick the hardest, sort of most almost least important piece of it. And so your doctors, when they see a food app, they probably haven't seen the other 30,000 food apps in the App Store right now that do a lot of this work. So I don't think that that's the right data point. I'm just concerned you're fighting the totally wrong battle, and that instead if you took a step back and went one level higher and said, okay, we're going to recommend these 3 food apps to use because we know how to deal with their data, that seems to me a much better scalable solution, especially being an early stage company, which can only do really one thing at this point. So the thing you pick to do at this stage is where my hesitation comes.
Right. Well, once again, I think I've seen my endocrinologists answer questions from other patients who would say, what apps are out there that I should be using? And they really say, yeah, there's a lot out there, but none of them are really killing it. And that these are,
Last question. What does your food app do? So you take pictures, you figure out the carb count, and then you translate the carb count into a blood sugar level thing. So what's different other than that last piece between your food app and every other food app out there?
The key point is that we're taking a pre-meal and a post-meal blood sugar. So we're essentially being able to tell you whether you're guessing these meals correctly. So all of a sudden, every time you eat that sandwich, every single time you're regenerating a carb count, you're regenerating, and you have to guess again how much medication to take. Once you solve that problem, you should be able to save that information and have it so that next time you go there, it's there for you. And it takes one less thing for you to have to worry about in the future.
If you had to choose between meal memory, is that what it's called? And your cloud-based patient management system, what do you call that?
I mean, it's going to be database.com. It's a self-management support.
Self-management support.
Yeah.
If you had to choose between one or the other, and you could not do both, theoretically, which would you choose?
Well, the whole system was designed that it was just tackling one part of the equation first, and that it all feeds into the same area. I think all this stuff, like I said, I think the contextualizing these readings is really important, and I think it's really that aggregation. I think that's the most important. Being able to give you pulling in these disparate feeds.
So does that mean that the management system, the cloud-based management system, is ultimately the most important thing for you to build?
For patients, yes.
So one of the things, if we kind of elevate this to the whole quantified self category, one of the great challenges is that and we've seen this, that it's largely aspirational. There's a small cohort that ends up being very diligent in terms of using their Fitbit or using their Nike Fuel Band.
Sure.
Then it tends to tail off. There tends to be a cohort. There's a lot of stuff that one has to do, I'm sure manually today as a diabetes sufferer. You're going to help automate some of it, but there's still a lot of stuff they're going to have to do. It sounds like, as you described, that pantheon of devices. How do you think about this kind of aspirational aspect of it? How do you encourage and promote the kind of constant use? Because you only get the benefit of your experience if people can end up mimicking some portion of what you did over the past year.
Sure.
And so one of my concerns is that, you didn't really talk about it today or in the business plan, is how you promote that kind of, voracious appetite for using the app.
Right. I don't think you need to have every user constantly putting in data. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is generate a unique data set and essentially be able to get enough data points on a specific type of meal that you can effectively say that this is how most people react to it, and this is a rather accurate estimate of the number of carbs. Another example is exercise. I trained last year for a marathon, and so I'm not going to be doing that every year, but if you have thousands of patients who are entering their information about how that training affects them, then you're going to be able to essentially be able to predict someone who's never trained for a marathon before, how that might affect their blood sugar. And not that I'm expecting everyone to run a marathon, but there's other use cases like the common cold, jet lag, gestational diabetes. You have lots of different use cases, and I think it doesn't have to be every patient entering their information all the time. And another point that I think that is...
That's what I'd love to hear more about, because that may answer some of the questions that we've been talking about and the concerns we have, which is if there's some network benefit that I get, even though I'm not doing it as inhumanely, unbelievably adherent as you've been doing it, that there is that network effect that you get. Talk about that, because that to me, we didn't really see the app in operation, but
Sure.
that could be something which is truly differentiated.
Right. And I think, stepping a half step back from that, as a patient and listening to people talk in the forums, people want to be part of the solution. The patients are really frustrated with the current state of software. Healthcare software is 10 years behind everything else. And so you have patients like me who've had diabetes for 26 years, and we are more than willing to help someone who's newly diagnosed and give our actionable information about how these things have affected us previously. And so getting all of that to happen is really important. There's already great communities out there developed by other diabetes patients, but none of them are really data-driven. I want to create a system that gives you really that support for making those exact decisions that we're going throughout the day.
Sort of back to Fred's question, if you pick the second piece, why is the answer, so when you have diabetes, you have an incentive to track everything. You have an incentive to manage your disease, to do a lot more work than I do to manage my weight fluctuations, if you will. And
Keep going, you're going to be a patient.
I know. It's not great. So, but to that notion, isn't the better approach here saying, hey, we're a holistic diabetes management company. In order to be great at managing your diabetes, here's what we recommend. We recommend you get a Fitbit or an Up and you plug it into this. We recommend you use these 3 food apps and you plug it into this. We recommend that you use these 3 insulin monitors because they have Bluetooth or they have Wi-Fi. And if you do those 3 pieces, you plug all 3 of those data sources into our platform, we can actually help you manage through this network effect. I think that that's the holy grail of what you're really talking about. You're just starting in such a, for me, a difficult place.
Sure. We realize that partnerships are going to be a key part of developing this business, and so we've already begun contacting the device manufacturers to get direct access to some of the data that's already happening. But they're slow to move. They're big companies.
But Up and Fitbit and those guys and the Nike thing all have APIs that you can plug into and take all that like the running data that's all on Facebook and things like that all the time.
No, for sure. But it's also that the diabetes data is obviously essential. I mean, if I develop an app that aggregates Fitbit data, there's just as much competition as the nutritional app.
I think our question, where we're kind of pointing you to and potentially trying to get you to respond to is, it seems to us like perhaps the data is the most valuable. And I think the thing that I'm confused about a little bit, uncertain about, is that you're sort of starting with this consumer app, and as we've kind of shared, there's a lot of competition in that space, and you're adding friction by saying there's a premium price to be paid. If this data is so valuable and you could aggregate it, wouldn't the payers who are really suffering, on the economic basis for covering all these patients, wouldn't they, have a huge incentive to get that data from you? Wouldn't that be the place? So wouldn't you try to get as much data, both food, glucose readings, all the data points, Fitbit data, all this stuff? If you had that data, wouldn't it be extremely valuable to the insurers? And therefore, why aren't you focusing on just any way you can aggregating that data, whether it's existing apps, existing devices, as opposed to trying to go down kind of what I think is a silo, or what you're hearing a silo? Why, I guess, sort of asking the same question, but can you reverse the business model and go after the insurers earlier once you build out that database?
Well, first you mentioned another point of just the value of the data itself, and we do believe that there is value in selling that either to pharmaceuticals or device manufacturers. It's not going to be as big of a revenue stream as the ones that we outlined. But we developed this because we want to just get to market as quickly as possible and direct to patients, and so that's why we designed the system that we did as the first products we went with.
But if you're a user of your system, is there any reason why you couldn't plug in other information? So if you had somebody using your meal memory and they were also using Fitbit and other things, wouldn't you be just as happy to grab all that information?
No, that's part of our plan, is to integrate these other APIs.
That's key. That's core to the idea, is that we pull in data from the Fitbit, from whatever other
Runkeeper,
devices
yeah,
somebody might use, and aggregate it all together, so that coupled with the device coming off Doug's continuous glucose monitor, you get a kind of much better picture about how the things they do on a day-to-day basis dictate the fluctuations in his blood sugar levels.
So is it fair to say, even if you failed completely with your meal memory, that as long as you're pulling in data into your big data set that you're then going to use to do your predictive analytics, that you could be successful?
Absolutely.
I think maybe the way I'm interpreting this line of questioning, which I share, by the way, is maybe more the way you're positioning meal memory in the market. And I wonder if the right way to go to market is with a cloud-based, personal data management system and a mobile client that's called the same thing. Right? The mobile client could have meal management application in it. But I think that the thing about leading with meal management is that I think it instantly puts you in a place where at least this investor community right here is scratching our head, right? And if instead you said Diabetes has a cloud service and Diabetes has a mobile app, and the Diabetes mobile app basically pulls data from the cloud, and the cool thing is that everybody that's using a Diabetes mobile app is all publishing this data to the cloud, and that's giving a data set that allows us to give back to people who are using the Diabetes client lots of valuable information that isn't only driven by what they're doing, it's driven by what everybody's doing. I think if you position it that way, I think that would be a more exciting story for investors. I think the problem is we're getting hung up on meal management, and you're just doing meal management because it's a part of the equation that diabetes patients need to manage. And I understand why you're doing that, but I think leading with a standalone app might be a mistake, certainly for investors, and it might also be a mistake as you take the product to market and trying to build your brand.
Yeah. I know this is a feedback session, but I would just echo that. I think I was confused during your presentation because you started with this view of I captured all this data, across my meals, across my glucose, my Fitbit. So I thought that was where you were going, and was surprised when you later said, and the product is meal mind or focused on sort of capturing the food aspect. It seems like you started with what you did was actually quite different than the product that you're trying to develop. And if what you did really worked for you, and if you could show that it could work for lots of people in this category, build that, right? Don't pick off just the piece that's the easiest to build.
There was a company that presented at TechCrunch Disrupt. They were finalists actually this week, called Healthy Out. They're doing diet management and trying to determine nutrition at a local restaurant level. And so if they're successful, they're going to literally be able to power your entire food data app. And there's 10 competitors to them going out there, going into the mom and pops, getting carb counts, doing some stuff around that stuff. Let those companies do the work for you. That's really hard and tedious, and most of those companies will fail. But if you just take their data and sort of make a platform around it, you have a lot better opportunity to stand out in the market. And I think you're hearing that across the...
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is if you just search under diabetes on the App Store, there's 652 results. Diabetes app gets you 326. I mean, there's just a lot of confusion out there. So even if we're dead wrong and there's just been an impedance mismatch in terms of how you've been communicating what it is you're actually doing, and we've been telling you, giving you feedback for what you're actually doing, which can sometimes happen. I think the challenge that's clear is with that much noise in the market, you've got a communications problem in terms of really bubbling up to the top. And so doing something which is truly unique and finding a path to market which is different than these 652 diabetes competitors within the iPhone App Store, let alone the Google App Store, I think becomes a real challenge. You look through these, there's a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today, and so that, as an investor, I look at it and say, boy, let's just wait till someone bubbles to the top and see if they really start to gain traction, because I still think that this, get the consistent usage, get this viral effect or the network effect you get from having a community kind of power the rest of the community. All that stuff is great when you've got a cohort that really seeks to, you talked about seeking advice from others, but you have to actively manage diabetes or else you die. I mean, it's a pretty simple, it's not like you don't have to manage your Fitbit. You don't necessarily die without managing it. Without diabetes management, you die. So there's a great incentive to do this. But somehow you've got to have something which is truly differentiated.
Which does, I think, along that line, you may want to think a little bit more about this idea of going to the payers, the providers, rather than trying to fight through the consumer noise. And it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, because they're going to care if you can aggregate data into a true big data set that you can work off of. But it may be that they provide you another channel or another way to aggregate quicker than trying to break through the noise of the 600 however many apps. So I think what you're, and there are a lot of people who are pretty, excited about this type of approach. So Denny Asiello's started a new center at MIT all around this area that you should definitely plug into. So don't take this all as negative. I think what you're doing is great and important, but I think the challenge that's being pointed out is kind of how do you get that starting point so that you get a chance to build out the rest of the platform.
Right.
All right, we're out of time. And that just reminds me, I think the feedback we've been hearing is so good. For those who are new to the competition runs for 8 months. So these teams have worked through 8 months. And as you heard me talk about how many teams have been in this before, to get into the final round of 12 and to earn the opportunity for you guys to be here in front of the brain power that we've got on this judging panel is truly fantastic, no matter what happens with any of the teams. So thank you guys. Appreciate it.
So
So hi everyone, my name is Robert. I'm one of the co-founders of Oculogica, and today I'd like to tell you on how we're going to change the way that you guys see healthcare. So, traumatic brain injury. It's a major problem. So it's been popularized by professional athletes, but in fact it's actually the people's problem. So every year, 4 to 7 million Americans visit an emergency room for getting hit on the head. Over 1 million of those people can be classified as concussion patients. Many of these people are actually hospitalized, and many of these people die. But you're going to notice from our stats up here on the board that there's a differential between the people who are hospitalized and people who have a concussion. So what happens to these people? So we're going to answer that question for you. So when this guy gets hit into the boards, what's he going to do next? He's going to go to the hospital, right? So he's going to get one of these things. It's the gold standard for head trauma right now. It's a CT scan. So a CT scanner costs $1,200. You're going to get your skull radiated, and if you're a child, you might even have to be sedated. So what do you get for this for a CT scan? You get these fantastic images of your brain. So these images are fantastic for structural brain injury. So you might be asking, what is that? Structural brain injury is when you have a bleed or a swell or a foreign objects lodged into your brain. The thing is, concussions will never show up on these scans. They just don't. So how are we going to treat this gap? People have concussions, but there's a gap in the treatment. We can fix that. Oculogica can diagnose concussions. So let me introduce Dr. Samadani, who's a chief neurosurgeon at the Manhattan VA and the founder of this technology.
Thank you. So the way this technology works is that we were doing a clinical trial to look at an outcome measure to improve outcomes after brain injury. Basically, what we needed to do was to develop a way to figure out if patients are brain injured. So we said we will use the algorithm, or we will check and use an algorithm to figure out if they can watch TV. This is the way it works. A little tiny aperture opens up in the computer monitor, and they follow it with their eyes. As they follow the aperture, each of the cranial nerves is triggered to fire. When they move their pupil up and down, it's cranial nerve 3. When they move it out to the side, it's cranial nerve 6. When they move it down and in, it's cranial nerve 4. We have data from 200 patients. Basically, what you see on the top right is essentially a normal study. And there are several aspects of that box that can be quantitated. The height of the box, which tells us about 3. The width of the box tells us about 6. The Y variability tells us about cranial nerve 2. When there's defects or gaps in the floor, that tells us about elevated intracranial pressure. There are a number of different things that we can diagnose with this. Obviously, one of the most pressing and relevant for us is concussion. In the bottom right corner, you can see an eye box trajectory of a patient who's been concussed. This patient has a normal CT scan and normal MRI scan. He has radiographically silent brain injury, but you can tell by looking at his eye box trajectory that he's not normal. In the diagonals, you can see 2 patients who have decreased box height. This is because they have a supratentorial brain injury resulting in a cranial nerve 3 palsy. So what you see in these patients is both of them have a loss of box height, but only one of them has a concussive component to that. So with this technology, we can differentiate between structural brain injury, non-structural brain injury, and other types of problems in the brain. Some of the things that we can diagnose with this are hydrocephalus, dementia, pseudotumor cerebri, and other neurologic pathologies. Now to talk about the marketing, one other thing that this can be useful for is determining when it is safe to return to work or play. This is an example of a patient that I saw. On the day of injury, he presented with a structural and concussive brain injury. We ended up operating on him. He had a small skull fracture, and we repaired this. So post-operative day number 1, we repeated a CT and an MRI scan, and they both showed that there was absolutely no swelling in his brain. There was no hemorrhage in his brain. The skull fracture was completely repaired, and he essentially had a radiographically normal film, or a film consistent with post-operative change. However, at 7 days post-operatively, he was still not his self. He could not use his cell phone. He could not do certain functions that he was able to do prior to his injury. When we obtained an eye box trajectory on him, you can see that he still had a concussive component to his injury. At 11 days post-op, he scored 37 out of 50 on his executive function testing. So he was still moderately impaired. By 35 days post-op, he could read the New York Times, and he was getting ready to go back to work. At 60 days post-op, he came back to work, and he'd recovered from his injury. Thus, we can use this technology to predict when someone can return to work or play. More importantly, researchers can use it to develop treatments for brain injury and radiographically silent brain injury. And we've already had a great deal of interest from people who are running clinical trials looking at methods to improve outcome after brain injury. Now to talk about the marketing and business aspect of this, I would like to introduce Steve Ogilvie. Steve has his MBA from Stern in 2004 and has worked in the medical device industry for 10 years, bringing a neuromonitoring device to market.
Thank you. So when Dr. Samdani introduced this technology to me, I thought, well, that's amazing. This is a new window into brain health. People are going to demand this. But I spend my life doing business development. I thought, okay, but how do you make money on this? There's no, I'm not selling a device, which is what we're familiar with. The market opportunity is actually what became the most compelling part of this. So there's a capital equipment component. There's a monitor and a camera. Sell those for about $50K, and that's the top line. 1,500 plus trauma centers in the US. That's a $75 million opportunity. That's interesting. The real opportunity is the fee per test. Basically, you push a button, run this test, we charge $300, and the eye boxes that Dr. Samdani showed you is the result that the physician interprets. That's a very modest fee, much less than an MRI. Right now, just for TBI and concussion alone, that's a $10 million test opportunity. That's $3 billion to go after with essentially no competition. No one's diagnosing concussion right now. And as she mentioned, there's a lot of applications outside of just concussion and traumatic brain injury. For any healthcare technology to be adopted, these are the 4 contingencies that have to fall in love with it. So let me spend some time on each one. First, the payers. They're the ones footing the bill. When someone gets a concussion, they go through the circuitous path of seeing physicians, MRI, CTs, qualitative, quantitative analysis that is inconclusive. They receive treatments, many years, frustrating, very expensive for the system. We believe our technology will become a mandate before one of these patients ever gets a CT. For $300, you're going to circumvent that whole thing, save a huge cost for the payers. Hospitals and doctors largely have their incentives aligned. As Robert mentioned, over 1 million concussed patients get pushed out of the ER each year in this country. That's a huge revenue stream if they were able to be treated. You can't treat them because you can't diagnose it and you can't follow their progression. Hospitals are dying to get this new revenue stream. Doctors are very interested in concussion. Hot topic right now for the high-profile cases, big market opportunity for them. I think the patient case has been well articulated. People don't know when to go to work. They don't know when they should drive a car. It's so frustrating to have a concussion. This will change all of that. Let's talk a bit about the early stage. So we already have about 4 or 5 research institutions who are basically writing us the check for the technology. They want the machine now. There's about 15 to 20 we want to work with to aggregate data, continue building out the strength of the platform from a data perspective. After that, we're going to hit the high-volume trauma centers in the US. The main marketing focus here is the data. Dr. Samdani has been presenting at a number of sort of peer events at hospitals. The interest that alone has generated has been overwhelming. We're simply not ready for it yet. And seeing is believing. For us, sending a machine in, doing 10 to 15 patients, they'll never let us take the machine back out of the hospital. Very compelling technology. Salesforce will be basically direct in this early wave. Once we get into the more regional, smaller centers, it'll be a traditional medical device distribution model. Talk about the FDA pathway. This was the other thing that really caught my eye. FDA is a nightmare right now. Getting stuff through there is extremely complicated. There's 25 eye trackers already approved. The way they collect data is exactly how we need it. What we do is calibrate it differently. That's where the patents are located. And then our software application with the interpretation is also where the IP is. So for us to get something approved, we'll simply be clearing a rebranded approved device. It's the best pathway one could hope for, a completely non-invasive diagnostic on an existing technology. Living in this industry, this is so exciting to be able to get through the FDA that quickly. We're hoping to submit by the end of this year, leaving a full year for clearance. It could be shorter than that, but predictability at the FDA is low right now. I mentioned the competitive landscape. Currently, there's no way to quantitate a concussion. There really is no diagnosis at all. A lot of things get used, but they don't tell you if they have a concussion. It's just kind of nipping at the edges. So our sales call will be more missionary in nature in the sense that we will need to convince people about the data set versus convince them that this is better than something else they're using because nothing is being done. Finally, I talked about this path. This is a real person's story where they spent years confused, angry, seeing multiple physicians, diagnostic tests without being cured, without receiving the proper treatment. This is gone. This person in 4 minutes after watching that little box move around the screen for 2 minutes and 20 seconds, the results are back. They would have been able to have been diagnosed and treated that instant. Completely changes the paradigm. again, thank you for the opportunity. We couldn't be more excited about this opportunity to change healthcare and improve the system.
Come on.
So I have a quick question.
Please.
Obviously, great job. Very topical, issue
Very.
right now. You read about it in sports. NFL just gave, I think, $100 million to Harvard to research this field. Just curious how binary. You seem to simplify the diagnosis that we can say yes or no. Is it that simple, or
Quantitative.
So in other words, so concussion? There's no spectrum. It's either clearly the person has and has not. You believe with your technology you can.
You can quantitate the extent of concussion, and you can quantitate the amount of recovery that's happening.
Yeah, so there's a severity of concussion. There are worse concussions. There's shades of gray, but you do cross a threshold. Either you have it or you don't. And then it's how severe. And that's the issue. So some people will be, I'm a little foggy. And other people, I can't, use a touch tone. And you think, well, what does that mean?
Right.
And we can quantitate that. So that's the big difference. So yeah, there is a clear threshold when you have it, and then we'll be able to define, no, that's a light concussion, or no, you have a severe concussion. Don't drive home.
So, sorry, that was an awesome presentation. Thank you. I have no idea after watching that what are the risks in your business. So how do you guys fail?
FDA is always a risk because they can throw curves. For us, I think the biggest risk, in full disclosure, the way it's done is entrenched. People are doing CTs and MRs for no good reason. It doesn't do anything. So you have to re-educate. And when I talk about a missionary cell, you have to go in, and we know there'll be surgeon champions, physician champions who will demand this, but they're going to have to go to their other colleagues in the hospital, radiology, for example, and say, look, you're doing a CT on a concussed patient, and you're telling me nothing. Let's do this technology together, and let's actually diagnose.
So sales and distribution are the two risks in this business. From a
Yeah.
technology standpoint, you're done? You're good?
It's been validated. There's strength to be added by adding more patients, more pathologies, and quantitating, okay, if the box is this much versus that much, what does it mean? There's an ability to become more and more robust in the strength of the diagnostic, but it's been validated.
So can you actually, I'm sorry to
Go
interrupt.
ahead.
Can you actually talk about the validation? What's your validation data set? How do you know that
Yeah,
those
so-
patterns predict X and not Y?
So far, we have data on about 200 patients, and that data comes from neurosurgery, which is my field, but also I've made a collaboration with ophthalmology, with neurology, and with psychiatry. And the ongoing data set, the collection that we're doing right now is with psychiatry. So basically what we're doing is we are doing a study at Bellevue. It has 3 arms. The first arm is structural brain injury. The second arm is non-structural brain injury or radiographically silent brain injury, which is concussion. And the third arm is non-brain injured patients. And we're following the patients prospectively with basically a clinical trial looking at a number of different outcome measures to validate this one. But most of those outcome measures are neurocognitive testing. And that's in conjunction with Charlie Marmar, who's the chair of the Department of Psychiatry and my collaborator.
So when you say it's validated, you're in the process of validating it.
Well, we have,
No, that's
we
the
have
second. I mean,
data.
we've already done the data. That's an additional study.
Yeah, we have data from multiple patients. It's just that
How many is multiple?
we have data from 200 patients.
Yeah, that's the 200 patients.
So you've done 200 patients.
Yes.
You followed them for how long?
Probably the mean is around 8 or 9 months, but
Okay.
not every single patient is at the mean.
And what you've been collecting is information on, quality of life, ability to do daily tasks, all that sort of thing, or?
No, most of the patients are neurosurgical patients who actually had different pathologies. So that's the problem with our current data set is that it's a very diverse spectrum of pathologies, most of which are tumors, some of which are trauma. It's probably, of the cranial patients that we've done, probably about half tumors and half trauma. The ophthalmology patients, so it turns out that certain ophthalmologic conditions affect eye tracking. The two that affect eye tracking are retinal pathology and optic nerve pathology. So you can subtract out those patients.
It was sort of the good problem that we had when we discovered it. It's like, oh, this tells you a wealth of things. And now as we know what it tells us, and it's diving deeper into each one to specify exactly what it means.
Okay, but
It's
so
one
the
of
patterns are predicting that the person has structural injury, silent injury, ophthalmologic problem, what have you.
Yeah, but I mean, if a patient, for example, has an ophthalmologic problem, you may not be able to interpret the eye tracking without a baseline. So if you have a patient with, say, internuclear ophthalmoplegia, you're in trouble. You're not going to be able to detect a concussion in that patient.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily, internuclear ophthalmoplegia is really rare.
There are some exclusions.
So do you think that 200 patients are sufficient to make your missionary sale? Or what is the clinical,
they
what does
already
the
are.
clinical community get to
So
demand?
I've shown this, not this talk, but the scientific data. I've given grand rounds already at several institutions. Plus, I've talked to Julian Bales and Rich Allenbogen, who are two of the neurosurgeons to the NFL. They are super excited about this. So there's 3 neurosurgeons to the NFL on the head advisory board. The third one, Jeff Manley, who's the chair of neurosurgery at UCSF, said at the last AANS meeting, 40 people came up to him and told him that he needed to talk to me.
Yeah, like
there's
the
huge
surgeon
demand.
community, like the light bulb goes off. They're like, oh, of course, like we'll know now.
When I show this
So-
to neurosurgeons, they are extremely excited.
So can we maybe talk a little about the FDA? So if there's no, the bullet you put up there was there's no concussion diagnostic is both good
Right.
and bad.
Right.
So how are you going to prove to the FDA that this actually works?
So
And
two
what are they going
things.
to, and what are they going to take?
Yeah,
from
it's a
that?
great question. So the devices that are already approved are just for eye tracking for different pathologies. So
Right.
we can get it approved, but we would not have a concussion label per se. The strength of that would be in the data, and the surgeons would use it. So we would not be able to market it as concussion from day one. The data will get us the label. So basically, that's why I did the 2 tiers of sales. You're going to have the research institutions first, and that'll be the focus. Obviously, we're not marketing concussion. We're
Right.
just marketing, hey, this is an eye tracker, and this is the data. Interpret it how you like.
So you're going to have to work, another way of saying it, Steve, just to cut through a little bit,
Yeah.
you're going to have to start phase 1 in the research, to continue the research while you develop, essentially a set of tests that the FDA is going to be complicit with to say, we accept this now.
To get the label for concussion.
Right.
Correct.
And those are the tests we're doing at Bellevue. That's
Yeah.
the neurocognitive
I understand, but
test.
there's difference in question.
doing it and someone else
Yeah,
doing
you
it.
doing it and the
That's-
FDA saying, we
Yeah.
accept it.
Which is
Absolutely.
why I've talked to all the other neurosurgeons who do concussion and brain injury research, because I cannot validate my own data for an
Right.
indication. They have to validate it.
Is there value in an indicator? And so, and I'm not suggesting necessarily you start here, but something that could be done on a battlefield, on a football field, that's more portable, that may not actually have the clinical indication
No,
of saying,
that's-
yes, you have a concussion or you don't, but
That's
you have a
absolutely.
concern, you have a reason to worry, you have a reason to go to the hospital, or you don't.
Absolutely the vision. So
yeah.
right now, the way the data is aggregated takes a higher tech camera than an iPad would have.
Right.
And a higher tech, but we want to get there. So if we don't have the full test on an iPad at some point in time, we'll at least be able to say an indication, no, rush them to the ER, or they just need to chill for a while. Because there are people that on the ski slope, it happens all the time. They can't get a CT. They may have a brain bleed and no one knows.
But can you start there, or do you have to start at the more clinical to validate sort of the methodology
we have,
and then work your way down?
We have to start at a more technical point, just
Yep.
from the data aggregation for the eye. The cameras just aren't good enough on an iPad. And so we want to validate it from that standpoint, and then with the algorithm, and then we can
So,
beef up
so
the
let me
camera.
push that a little bit. What do you need? What will it take? If you say the camera isn't good enough on an iPad in 2013, what will it take in terms of the resolution of the camera or the power of the encoder or decoder?
Yeah, so 2 answers to the question. One, you could either go from the technology, ramp the iPad technology to where we need it, or just say, look, we're going to have a dumbed-down test. And say, we're not going to do the full array of diagnostics. We're just going to give you a black, white, yeah, big problem, no problem.
Is what hardware is necessary in the iPad to make it good enough?
So
Yeah.
the webcam.
Do you want to show the picture
Yeah,
of the device? I think that'll help.
The tracker that we used for this data was an iLink tracker that samples pupil location at 500 hertz. So you get 500 data points per second. We've tried it on a Tobii eye tracker, which is a 50 hertz eye tracker. So that's tenfold less, but we haven't done abnormal people on a Tobii. We've only done normal people on a Tobii, so I can't tell you if I can diagnose everything yet on a Tobii.
So it's a
but-
research exercise. There's going to
Yeah.
be limitations.
And
I don't know what the threshold is yet.
Okay.
This collects a lot of
But
data
you can
points.
theoretically build a device that you can plug on top of the iPad
Absolutely.
at some point to
But
make
at
a
some
portable
point,
version.
you're going to bring
Right.
down the technology threshold to the point where you're not going to get the information. And what's the right balance? I haven't answered that question yet, but that's where it gets exciting, where you have one of these in every stadium, or everyone on their phone can have these. Their kid gets hit in a game. You do the test on your iPad.
What's
Yeah.
the cost to you guys? What are the cogs of 500 hertz eye
So,
tracker?
so this was the first
Without
prototype
flat
unit.
screen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the eye tracker itself costs $32,000, and then there's 2 computers, and that cart you can wheel up to a patient's bedside, and it won't fall over on the patient. $2,000.
So that's the most it'll ever cost, because this is the research unit. We can do it for
Yeah.
half that. The ones that are already on the market that have the equivalent data, I mean, they're less than 20 cost of goods.
A Tobii's cheap. Tobii's are like 9,000.
So could I buy an eye tracker and run some video around a screen and create that same data set and publish it?
Nope.
Why?
You need our algorithm, and you need our calibration methodology, which is proprietary. And that's where the IP is.
That's the hard part.
Can someone reverse engineer it?
I mean, someone always can reverse engineer it, but that's why we have IP. I mean,
But could someone reverse engineer it and open source it?
So there's
Because I'm just thinking about the $300, right? That's a lot of money. That's $3 billion, right? So what if someone just says, screw it, we'll make this thing free?
Yeah, so we're not going to
and help society.
And let me explain the way this will work. We're not going to put the brains of it in here. This will just aggregate the data, send it to an outsourced place where the test is sort of synthesized, PDF the results back to the hospital. So we're not going to put the IP on the device. We'll put it in an outsourced data center.
That's the hard part, is the getting from, that's the difference between what we've done and the last 3,000 papers on eye movement tracking is calibration method. And that's the part that's patented. So there was an original provisional patent submitted last year. There have been 2 provisionals already, and then there was a utility patent submitted last
So it's
month.
not just software.
Yeah, no, this is actually complex stuff, and there's going to
methodology
be
and how
another
you
provisional
collect
that's
it.
going in the next couple
That's why I
of
said
days.
it's the way you calibrate and the way you kind of.
So why did you choose to patent it rather than protecting it by trade secret? Because it seems like if you're going to be a central lab, you would
Other
have been...
people will be able to reverse engineer it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. The calibration component of it, once you do a test, if you're familiar with this, you realize, oh, that's how they're doing it. So that needed to be patented.
He figured it out when I showed him.
Tell us about the team. So you guys are making a lot of headway, and it strikes me that you're going to continue on with this. So, do you have a full-time job, Steve? I mean,
I am an employed person.
Yeah. So
so let me.
Help us
Yeah.
understand.
So Robert's full-time on this, and he's working on making this into the commercial unit with his engineering background. It's largely been a clinical exercise up to this point, and Dr. Samadani has clinical funding, and she has a lab. That's actually a lovely lab we're in right there. I've been working as a consultant up to this point. Really, the way we've envisioned this is we'll get through the prototyping for the OEM manufacturer and begin the submission, and that's when we sort of start the full-time. Before then, it'd be excessive. We just don't need that level right now.
Okay.
Do you guys, you talked about the market, and maybe you glossed over this, but do you need a reimbursement code from CMS for this test?
Nystagmography is the
or is there an existing code?
Yeah, so there's, in the world of hospital coding, there's a hospital code and the physician code, DRGs and CPTs.
Right.
There is a DRG, meaning you can bring a patient to the hospital and there's a concussion code. It's $4,500. So there's real money for the hospital. Eye tracking tests have a CPT code, so physicians can bill for interpreting the eye box.
What's the cost of that test?
Medicare reimburses $475 for it, if I'm not
For
mistaken.
nystagmography,
For
yes.
nystagmography,
That's correct.
Medicare is the lowest. Private payers are probably double that. Medicare is about 20 to 30% of the market.
And that's for this indication? Are people going for eye tracker
It's a broad
test?
It's just nystagmography is eye tracking. It's broad.
It's a broad mental assessment.
So, and what you're getting to is, okay, if we get a concussion label from the FDA, right, and which is going to be the real battle with the FDA, and then do we go and get our own code because this proprietary data is worth more than just an eye tracking test? And we think the potential is there, but you can't bank on that because that's a multi-year process. But we'd like to charge a lot more than $300.
But given the political pressures of being able to detect radiographically silent brain injury in the military, it's going to be very hard for any congressperson to stand up and say, I am opposed to detection of radiographically silent brain injury. I mean, how are they going to support that?
Yeah, it's so much easier to get a medical product into market when there's an existing code you can write off, which it does sound like
there is. There absolutely is.
That's what we'll use
Battling,
at first.
as we've seen, Congress moves at,
Right,
I
but
would say,
that's-
snail's pace is giving
Yeah,
us
but the
more
military,
credit.
the military pathway is a really interesting one because there are RFPs. There's so much work going on right now. DARPA has just tons of funds going toward trying to do this in the battlefield.
Like blast injury, this will have huge insight as to the nature and severity of blast injury. Like DoD will have to have these on the battlefield.
Can you quickly show us your financial plan? Because that was something where, as I read your business plan that seemed a little fictional.
We don't have the full spreadsheet in the slides.
Okay.
I'm happy to speak to whatever you want to talk about. I mean, the core component is selling the initial capital equipment.
Yeah.
And that really is the first 10, 15 sales. We'll sell them for $50K to these research institutions. After that, it's the per-click fee.
Okay, so if I read, and it may be not the most up-to-date thing, and my business school finance professor would be very happy that I actually read the numbers because I never did when I was in school. But if I got it right, after a few years, you're doing $14 million of sales on an $800,000 payroll. And so if that's the case, I would probably go back and suggest that you find someone who knows finance to help you with the business plan because
what's not
4 or
in there
5
is-
salespeople to drive $14 million would be an awesome business.
Yeah, what's not in there is the distribution network beyond
Okay.
that. Because then you have to third party once you get into that size. We'll do through this.
Payroll seemed the
Well,
indicated payroll.
But that's the
seemed
cool thing about this business model. There's no inventory, right? And there's no, I mean, the cost of goods is the machine, and you only order those when the customer orders them. It's, you know, it's like Dell in the old days. And there's no inventory at all. So
Dell still had more than 5 people when they had 14 million sales.
Fair enough, fair enough. So yeah, we'll have people running the data center, we'll have people selling, but it's a very different model from the traditional, look, I gotta be there for every case, I need to service the machine every day. Anyway, it is different than the traditional model.
I would push back and just say, I wouldn't take that for granted. If you're gonna sell a system that determines whether or not you have you may get those calls about why the eye tracker isn't working today.
We will.
Or, so to Dave's point,
No,
I wouldn't oversimplify it by saying we're gonna, unless you're truly gonna say, buy any eye tracker, you know, that has 500 hertz or better, and set it up, and we're just the software provider, which you can do. But it does appear in the pitch that you're giving that you're selling a system.
Yeah, we need to control it in the early going.
Yeah.
Well, Micah speaks from experience. He built a company that had a cart like that.
No, and
had
I work at a
software.
company that sells these carts.
Slightly
Yeah.
better looking.
Slightly better looking.
Well, no, I
You'll
hope
get
it was
there.
a lot
You'll get
better
there.
looking.
I can tell you're industrial.
Yeah, and my current position is at a neurodiagnostic company, and we sell carts like this, and we have a big service component. But anyway, the business model is much more complicated because we have disposables, and that totally changes it. It did not have that in this model.
Fair enough. Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's here, the moment is now, about to decide. Let him leave him behind, but keep me near in your heart. No, whatever you do, I'm here by your side.
right, if everyone can please take their seats, we're about to commence the final team in the Technology Venture Finals. So it's my pleasure to introduce Bench Powers. From Bench Powers, we have Ching Yang Yang. Good enough, yeah. Australians in it, with Chinese names, not good. Raoul and Jasmine. Now, Bench Pals simplifies laboratory management, unifying lab notebooks and inventory management via intuitive, secure software, creating a revolutionary new way for scientists to get stuff done. Warm round of applause for Bench Pals.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jasmine. I'm from Bench Pals. I'm here with my co-founders, Ching Yao and Raoul. The three of us are scientists. We work in laboratories every day, running tons of experiments to hopefully make advancements in the areas of medicine and material science. So some of the things that we're dealing with, aside from just our experiments, are actually management of these laboratories. The way this is currently done, we're using a lot of paper. So we're using paper purchase order forms to place orders for chemicals and reagents to restock the shelves in our lab. We're also using paper laboratory notebooks to keep track of our very important procedures and experimental results. It seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? That scientists who are supposed to be doing lots of high-tech work are actually using these paper-based products to keep track of our important data. So if we look at another tool, for example, the telephone, something we're all familiar with, right? Looking over the time scale of just 50 years, it doesn't even look like the same device, does it? Two totally different things. So why is it that the tools and technology that scientists are using to manage their important experiments hasn't changed at all over the same time scale? Even going farther back, I'm sure if you were to look at Einstein's notebooks, they look pretty much similar to the ones that we're using today. There are a few reasons. So the laboratory notebooks that we're currently using are regulated. These notebooks have a few important features that they must have for reasons of IP protection. The first of these is that they have to have a table of contents. You have to be able to check what's in that laboratory notebook. They also have all of the pages of that laboratory notebook numbered. If anyone goes to audit your data and they see that a few pages have been ripped out, well, you could be accused of fraudulent data. So these regulated laboratory notebooks, they're actually quite costly. They run between $25 and $40 per notebook. If you're thinking about the lifetime of a PhD student, we're not using one notebook, we're accumulating many of them, maybe 5 to 10 of these notebooks. So we're using tools that are really, really inefficient, and they're actually quite costly when you think about it. So in terms of the workflow of a scientist, we're dealing with a ton of different things. We're dealing with managing our procedures, sharing them with our peers, also managing these huge inventories of very valuable, expensive chemicals, which can sometimes number above 1,000 different reagents in just a given lab. So we're also doing things like calculations to determine experimental conditions for the experiments that we need to run. Right now, these calculations, we tend to do them either on Excel spreadsheets or even by hand sometimes. We estimate that all of this, managing our workflow, takes about 2 hours a day even. This is 2 hours where we're not doing experiments and running them. We're just planning and recording them. BenchPals has created a digital platform which will cut down the time spent managing this type of data from 2 hours a day down to 2 minutes a day. And we've done it by using 3 key features that integrate all of the necessary work that goes into a researcher's workflow. Those are an electronic laboratory notebook, a digital inventory database of all of the chemicals in a given lab, as well as nerdy, cool lab gadgets, we call them, which are timers and calculators that scientists use to automate those calculations that we're doing. So all of this reduces it to just 2 minutes a day, taking care of these things. So we have more time to spend on the science, which is what we actually want to spend our time on, right? So it's really important that we've developed this platform for mobile devices. Currently, we have an iPad app and an iPhone app that are taking care of these things for researchers. The main importance of this is that scientists are not always attached to their computers. We're not working from desks, we're working from lab benches, where we have various pieces of equipment in our laboratory, and we want to be able to give scientists a tool that enables them to manage their work remotely and in a mobile sense from their lab benches. The features of this software that really set it apart from what's out there is that it's searchable, it's shareable, and importantly, all the data is backed up. So we had a recent reminder of this with NYU Medical Center during Sandy when the labs were flooded. They lost a ton of very valuable data. If we're storing all of these important procedures and results in these paper lab notebooks, they can vanish. They can be damaged. However, if the software is able to back up this data, this is incredibly valuable. Also, if people are using these laboratory notebooks regularly to record their data, what we're also getting is a significant amount of metadata, which is actually very useful for the managers of these laboratories. You're able to determine where researchers are spending their time, where the lab is spending money, and managers of the labs are able to then make important decisions on how to cut back costs and save valuable funds from grants, for example. So there are a few competitors in this space. However, they can be divided into two separate groups. There are a few companies who are focusing on the problems involved with inventory management as well as purchasing. And then there are some companies that are also looking to make electronic notebooks. However, BenchPals has recognized that by integrating the inventory management with the electronic laboratory notebooks, what you're basically getting is you're enabling the lab to kind of start running itself. So if people are logging in their inventory items into the electronic lab notebook, what you have is essentially tracking of chemical usage. So you can set it up so that the lab is basically reordering these items automatically. You don't even have to think about it. We've estimated that the market for this type of industry is on the order of $20 billion, and we've broken it up into 3 different segments. The first of these is academia. We then have industry segments. Initially, we're focusing on smaller size laboratories, more analogous to the size of an academic lab, specifically in biotech startup companies as well as clinical laboratories who are also facing the same organizational problems. As you can see, the majority of the market is coming from these industry segments. However, we cannot dismiss the academic segment because of how we plan on entering the market. With 700,000 graduate students currently working in science and engineering labs across the country, we view these students as a really valuable tool because these students are usually early adopters for this type of technology. What's going to happen with these students? Hopefully they're going to graduate, get jobs, some of them in industry, and take this type of software with them, helping us get a foot into different industries with this software. So BenchPals in the near future will basically release the app. We have a working prototype now. It's being tested in 2 labs. We're going to release the app this summer, and then we're going to take advantage of our positioning both at NYU and at Weill Cornell to have labs within those institutions test the app. We'd like to target the top 10 universities in the country and try and get the software into some of those labs, and hopefully the other labs will follow suit. In addition to focusing on getting it into academic labs, we're also working to get our first industrial client, which will enable us to develop the software, kind of tailor it to their specifications to build a robust product for industry as well. I'd like to introduce my team. It's Qingyao Yang, Raul, myself. We're also working with a graphic designer for the app, as well as a database programmer. We're currently still on the lookout for someone in the area of business development to join our team, so I feel like this is a good time to advertise. If anyone knows anyone, feel free to give us a shout. So we're BenchPals. We're really excited to be revolutionizing the laboratory environment and enabling scientists to do better science. We encourage you guys to link up with us on your favorite social network. And now we're really excited because we actually have a demo for you guys of the app, so you get to see it and enjoy. It's a little bit speedy, so hold on to your seats and enjoy. Sorry.
No problem.
It came on after. It's okay. It's okay.
Give me the scientist, always stuck on, always trying this. I gotta live on science alone now.
Song is the best part. No. Oh, it's still. Sorry, it's still playing on our computer. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Problem? Well, it doesn't matter. Let's just.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's a very innovative use of cuts, I think. People are, I'm liking it. I'm enjoying it. Wow. Now, imagine if Einstein had that. All right, let's get me feeling on the 50 bucks.
Okay.
Who wants to kick us off?
Does this require the entire laboratory to adopt it, or can this be adopted by one scientist and researcher at a time?
Individuals. Right now, individuals. I mean, I think it will be different for enterprise edition, but if we're focusing on academic laboratories, it's on an individual basis.
So then how does the inventory system work if only one person's using it?
Well, it only takes one person to manage an inventory system. So you can have everything managed by that one person, which is actually how most labs are run right now anyway. But it's obviously beneficial if you have more people interacting. It takes the burden off of that one person.
Yeah, so at the time of sales, we will target to begin with the lab managers and PIs because they have this decision power over the lab, basically. And also the software is multi-modular, so it has like these different features that are integrated. So we just need each user to get engaged initially with one of them and eventually grow and make them use the other features as well when they discover that it is actually the way to go to have everything integrated.
So you're talking more than one person can manage the lab, but just to maybe expand a little bit, so is this only effective if everybody in the entire lab is using it?
No. It's effective if at least one person is using it. However, that one person would have, quote unquote, the burden of making sure that everything is being ordered and the inventory is organized. If you have more people in the lab, it obviously becomes a more automatic and easier process for everyone working with it.
Is the digitizing of the notebooks the crux of what you're doing, or is it the inventory management, if you had to pick one? Or is it the combination that matters?
The combination is really critical. So there are competitors over there, as we mentioned. None of these companies has actually been successful.
Why?
Because they don't integrate. So it is tedious to adopt the technology at some point. We are actually working making it more seamless, but the fact is that it is tedious, and if you don't cover all what you have to do in the lab with the software, you just drop it. That is why integration is going to be the perfect vector to get our users to adopt the technology. Yeah.
Sorry, so we were just asking the same question. It's unclear how these two things are connected. So why is order management connected with lab notebooks and tracking for IP purposes and innovation? Because clearly you have a bunch of companies working on one dimension, a bunch of companies working on the other.
Yeah.
Why is that intersection so valuable? It's not clear to us.
Yeah, unfortunately this was in the demo, but if you, basically in the software, we enable the two of them are linked. So when you're logging things in your laboratory notebook, you're able to grab reagents from the inventory. If you have information such as the quantity in a given bottle, and you're logging how much of it you're using, you're able to subtract that and you know how much is left on your shelves or in your bottles, basically, just by calculating it from how much you're using in your laboratory notebooks and grouping all of that for the entire lab.
Yeah, also users value ecosystems. That is why Apple or Google are successful, because you get a device and all of a sudden it syncs all your email, videos, whatever you have. It is smart enough to pull all what you care about and put it together in the ecosystem. So in terms of lab, there are two very important things that are expensive to buy or generate, the reagents and the data. And having a software that is smart enough and creates an ecosystem that the user feels comfortable with and actually saves time is what we need, and there is no such product right there yet.
So just to push back a little, my experience is that there's usually a lab manager who's just responsible for keeping up the shelves, and the scientists have very different profiles. Don't want to deal at all with ordering. They just, the only time you hear from them in terms of supplies is if there aren't enough supplies. And so I guess connecting, because there are two different actors in the chain here, and
sometimes they're the same. Sometimes
perhaps,
the manager is a researcher as well.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, so there are different management rights in the software, and an example of how that could work is, for instance, I'm a researcher, I don't have any purchasing power in the lab, but I need something. So what I do is put in a purchase request in the software, and then the lab manager has to approve it. That's actually the flow. The flow we have right now has to approve it, or the PI might have to approve it, and then the order is pushed, and eventually someone receives that and is also going to log. So there is a perfect tracking of what's going on with the reagent. Then when you use it in your experiments, that's going to be logged in the notebook, but you are going to know in the back end what is the amount left. You can have a more efficient usage of everything.
So can you tell us maybe a bit about your go-to-market? You talked a bit about competition, more about competition in the presentation that you had in your plan, but I'd love to understand more about kind of how you're going to take this to market.
Yeah. So I think the fact that we're in two different institutions in New York City, we're going to take advantage of that, first of all. So within our own labs, within the institutions, we've already had a ton of researchers who are constantly asking us when it's coming out because they do want to use it for their research, as well as other universities. So that means potentially going to conferences, advertising this, putting advertisements in scientific journals, gaining access to scientists who are in those labs and who might find this type of software useful for their research.
In the two labs that you're in right now, what's the adoption?
Can you define adoption a little bit?
How many people are using it?
So currently we have 2 labs in our lab, and Raul has the other devices in his lab. So we tested it at this stage.
My lab manager is using it already for purchasing.
So it's 2 lab managers?
Yeah.
Okay. You had said, just maybe to go back for a second, to go to market, you had said that the other competitors have not had much traction. And we asked you why. So have they adopted a similar approach toward spreading the word and getting out there? And is there a novelty in the way you're thinking about going to market?
Yeah, they've adopted similar approaches in terms of attacking the market. However, one thing that we didn't point out is that they don't have mobile applications. All of the sites are web-based right now. So for us, it's a really big disconnect between going to computers and accessing this type of technology and software and using it where we're actually doing our work.
Yeah, you're working with the gloves on, with some nasty chemicals around, and you don't want to have to be going back to the computer and typing something. And in this regard, actually, the next step, and it's something that we are considering already, is starting developing the version for Android, which is going to be the prelude for the Google glasses, which is going to be ultimately the ideal way of capturing data from lab and having everything perfectly integrated with your daily work life, basically.
Have you approached the suppliers of products to these labs, like, I don't know, the Sigma Aldrich or the LifeTech or whoever those guys are? So I think they would have a vested interest in, I'm sure they have electronic ordering, but tools that lock them in as suppliers to these labs.
Yeah. So we are thinking on exploiting that revenue model as well, although it's secondary to us right now. So we have one purchasing portal, and what we do right now is you do a search and you can find any reagent over there in the internet by consulting in different websites for chemicals. And our idea is to contact the big suppliers, VWR, Sigma, others, and tell them, okay, you guys will be in the front page for this fee, or additionally just charge a fee for every transaction that happens through our software.
These notebooks that you have, when a laboratory gets flooded and they're lost, is that a problem?
I would say yes.
Okay, so what happens when you go out of business and somebody was using your system for their lab notebook and your servers go down because you go out of business and their 2 years worth of research is gone?
Well, that would not happen. We wouldn't allow that to happen.
How would you protect it?
Do you want to answer this, Raul?
You back up. I mean, that's the advantage.
Back up into a proprietary format, though? I mean, back up into what?
So that's the way cloud-based services always work. You have a daily, even hourly backups of all the data.
No. But my point is, if you go out of business, company goes under, you go out of business, and the data that I've been storing in your system, in your proprietary format, in the cloud, is no longer available to me. How do I get it? What's the format? How do I get that data back?
Well, that is not supposed to happen technically.
At this point, we're thinking about two strategies at this point. Either we send the data back to you, or there's a button to print it out. So if we end in the services, you could easily just print it out, everything you have from the notebooks. And everything is actually date stamped. So there's no way to plagiarize.
So being able to print it out is a good answer, I think. But the point I'm making here is that I think most people will ask you this question before they adopt your technology, and you better have a good answer for it.
No, so there is another thing, like the Enterprise Edition. One of the things that we are very clear about is that we are going to have to give the option of using their own servers. So configuring the software so that they have the server under their control. That happens in a pharmaceutical company that we are in contact with, that they are actually going to beta test. And they are very picky about where the data is, obviously, because it's very relevant data for them. And instead of using our server, they want to use their server, and that they have even physically under control. So that's the way to go with it.
I wouldn't recommend letting people do that. That's going to be a nightmare for you. Every company I've seen that gets into that way of going to market ends up regretting it. You're a cloud-based company. People got to move to the cloud. If they don't want to do it, don't take them on as customers.
You can have a save to PDF button or export to PDF, which does the same thing as print, which answers his question and makes it really quick.
Great answer. Great answer.
Thank you.
So we have this feature. Okay.
I'm unemployed, so it's perfect.
Unemployable.
But thanks for that question. We actually have the feature planned already, so you could easily just export to anyone or.
Good.
Yeah, we implement that for two reasons. Also to make the people that are not that keen on technology to adopt it also, because maybe a grad student wants to use it, but then the PI is reluctant. So the fact of being able to print and have hard copies is always useful.
So one of the things from your business plan that I didn't quite understand is you had mentioned that competitors are working with the large suppliers, and you've ruled that out, and you're going to go to the medium or niche suppliers. I mean, doesn't that kind of also take away part of the market for your customers who are going to want to have the access to those large suppliers?
Well, that's part of the market strategy we have. We want to do a sort of organic growth starting from the academia, as Jasmine mentioned. And we believe this is a right strategy based on one assumption, which is that there is going to be a massive move towards mobile platforms in the next years, which is ongoing.
That was all great. That actually didn't answer my question.
I don't think that we would eliminate the large suppliers as someone to partner with or to work with. We just want to highlight smaller suppliers because it's a lot harder for them to access laboratories as customers.
Okay, to bring a marketplace. And tell us about your pricing, because that was also something that was a little different from expectations of mobile apps.
Yeah, so this is something that we need researchers to feel comfortable that their data is going to be accessible to them in the future and continuously. So the pricing initially for academic researchers, we're going to charge $5 per download for the app, and then have a 90-day free trial period. After 90 days, we're going to be charging a monthly subscription of $9 to continue to use the service.
So I don't know what you call that. I know what freemium is, but this is something where it's premium?
Paid freemium.
Yeah, something like that. So why, I mean, I know you guys get money up front, which is a good thing to get, but the combination of both, that's kind of the worst of both, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that's
so why would you charge the $5 and then charge?
Well, I guess we could eliminate that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are looking for a business person to
at this stage,
calculate
They said they need a business person.
This is why.
Good answer. Exactly.
And in fact, I think we have a volunteer.
Yeah, but on top of it, we think like freemium things, or we could give these services to customers, but at the same time, I think data is precious. So if they cares about the data, we could even cooperate with government and have some funding for that one, and probably labs would like to invest some monies on it instead of just spending like $25 for one student. to keep their notebooks.
Yeah, and also regarding the industry, so ultimately the long-term goal is getting into the industry. I have been surveying a couple of people in big pharmaceutical companies and smaller biotechs. They would pay like $1,000 to $2,000 year fee for this kind of software, as long as you demonstrate that their data is safe and readily accessible always. And I think that is a huge market. And also they are interested because they can monitorize their strategy for research itself and maybe cut lines of research that are not productive and things like that, thanks to the metadata, which is an extra service that we can provide to them.
Okay. Thanks.
All right, thank you guys. You know, I really empathize with Bench Powers. They put a lot of work into that demo. It looked very professional, the glimpses that we saw. And I know what it's like when you put that much work into something and something goes wrong. But I'm reminded of the advice of that great philosopher, Mike Tyson, who says, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. All right. So we're about... We're about to get into the, after a short transition, we're going to get into the audience voting. So we'd like to hear what you think about each of our 4 finalists. And our judges are about to go and deliberate, and we'll be announcing the results at 5:15 this evening. But before they do, I think they've been absolutely fantastic today. So I'd like you to thank Fred Wilson, David Tisch, David Aronoff, Michael Rosenblum, Jeffrey Smith, and Frank Rimolowski. Thank you, guys.